Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of The Best Games Period. I'm your host, Jack Gardner, and with me this week is Naomi Lugo.
Hello, everyone.
And this is the podcast where we all get together every week and we discuss one game that we think belongs in the canon of great video games, of best video games, in fact, the best of all time. And so we're just here to talk about it. We're going to maybe disagree, maybe agree, who knows? We don't. And then at the end of the episode, we'll kind of make our final case. And then you, the listeners, can vote on Twitter and let us know what you think. And we'll read the results. And speaking of those results, what were the results on last week's game, Pokemon Go?
So, Pokemon Go, we asked, yes, you gotta catch them all. Or, if no, this is indeed not one of the best video games, period. And a resounding majority of you guys didn't think that it was one of the best games, period, which I guess is fair. It was 17 to 83%, so a pretty sweeping majority said no to Pokemon Go.
Yeah, I mean, more like Pokemon Go Home.
Or Pokemon
No one's ever said that.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, there's a lot of issues with the game that doesn't make it, like, the best. But it's still got a place in video game history. We'll say that at the very least.
We're not looking to like erase any video game from history except that one, and you know which one I'm talking about.
And if we say no on this podcast, like if the game doesn't make the cut, we effectively go back into its Wikipedia and start just erasing everything. The game no longer exists. So
Delete
Ni no
the
Kuni,
files.
like, barely held on, just with the spirit of one person.
But it stole your enthusiasm.
See.
But, no, if a game doesn't make it in, it doesn't mean it's the worst game. It just means it might have been a good game or even a great game, but it doesn't quite hit the level of best game, period. And you can have more than one best game, period, the same way you could have more than one best friend. But, you know, you have to draw the line somewhere, right?
Yes. All right, so what's our game this week, Jack? What's our game?
This week, we finally talk about Mario 64, and I'm so excited. Super Mario 64. Gotta get that super in there.
Gotta get that branding consistent, man.
Super Mario 64. And I'm super excited to talk about this one. This one is a classic, like an all-time classic. Like, you'll see this on pretty much every top 20 games of all time. You know, pretty much every single one. Somewhere in there. There's going to be a Super Mario 64. And I think that is deserved. I know there are people out there who would disagree with that assessment. But I'm here to make the case that it is one of the best games, period.
Indeed.
I'm kind of showing my hand early, I know.
We all know what you're going to say, Jack. So we'll start out with the question.
Yep.
So there's 15 level-esque things in this game. Which one's your favorite?
You know, I'm kind of a sucker for the very first one.
Okay.
Because I love the giant Bob-omb with the mustache. I just think it's really great.
Yeah, that's solid reasoning.
I mean, that's like the best reasoning I have for pretty much anything. It's a giant bomb and it's a mustache and you have to wrestle it. And it's great.
All right. And it's got the like classic mechanics of the game. I think it's a really good example of what the rest of the game kind of has to offer. Yeah.
It's a very good vertical slice of everything.
Yes.
And I think it's one of those games that is just designed so well that I don't feel like there are tons of mechanics that are introduced throughout the game. But you have all of your tools from the start, and it's just learning how to apply those effectively in different situations.
Yeah, it's more like changes to the world and different types of enemies, different, just things that you have to react to. So, my favorite level, it's kind of hard. Like, I have the nostalgic ones that I love,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love the haunted castle one. That one's just kind of awesome. Big Boo's Haunt.
That's a classic.
That
would be my runner-up.
Yeah, because I mean, it's creepy, and there's a piano that's trying to eat you in it, and that's just, that ticks my box. If your game level has a piano with teeth and fangs, you're gonna win in my book. So just a note. But
how many other games have checked that box?
None so far. So that's definitely adding to the pro list on Super Mario 64, excuse me. But thinking back, I have to say my favorite level was the Hazy Maze cave. So I'll say that 3 times fast. Holy crap. And this is a nostalgia one because I remember kind of being frustrated by that level. But it was the one that I found had the most depth, I guess. I mean, all of these levels are pretty simple. I mean, it's just how the game's designed. But this one, it's a maze, and you are just unveiling different parts of the level, and I just really enjoyed that. And plus, there's a part where there's a Lapras-looking, like, Nessie monster, and you have to jump on his head, and that's just awesome.
That sounds like you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, all of these different levels, I think the way they're designed lends to why this game is one of the best games, period. And it's again, it's that simplicity, but intentional simplicity. And each level, a lot of them are really different. There's similarities, but I think they're all different enough, and they all have their own point to them, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah.
Like in the Ice Mountain level, you're sliding around, like it's a giant slide basically, and it's super awesome, and there's penguins everywhere. That one's really different than the first level, but yeah. they each were unique enough where I wanted to visit them again and again to get all those stars. Which
is good, because you have to get all of the stars.
Unless you're a weird completionist who's just able to run through the entire level and do it all at once. That's not me. Not at all.
Yeah, and it's also notable that it did all of these things so well, and it's one of the first of many 3D platformers on consoles. And so, we're not really explaining anything new to people, I don't think, except maybe our younger listeners. Who've never played it or never had a chance to play.
I suppose the game came out in 96, so it's 22 years old now, so there's 20-year-olds who are younger than this game, which is crazy.
Yep.
Like, my brothers are younger than this game. Wow.
Yeah, think about that for a while.
I mean, but at the same time, this was my first Mario game, which is probably shocking to a lot of people.
That is kind of shocking to me.
I mean, it came out in 96, I was born in 92. I mean, it makes sense chronologically, but I mean, this was the first Mario game I actually played and really enjoyed. I mean, I will let you guys in on a little secret. Mario's not totally my jam. I'm not totally against it, but Mario 64 is my favorite Mario game.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
why is that?
Platformers. I'm also kind of semi-allergic to platformers. Not as much.
Oh my gosh,
as
you're allergic to like 75% of games.
I know, especially old games. So imagine just young me just breaking into games, and they're all puzzles and platformers. It's
what
painful.
A struggle fest.
It just shows how much love for gaming I have, I guess, where I'm just able to suffer through it. Oh my gosh, I was watching a speed run of Mario 64, like a glitched out one, so they beat it in like 6 minutes. But this person was stressing me out because of the way they were platforming. They were just like exploiting jumps to get across and like diagonal. I was pretty much on the edge of my seat watching them. Like, I will never have this much skill in platforming ever. And I'm okay with that.
That's fine. You don't have to have a ton of skill.
No.
And that's kind of one of the great things about Super Mario 64 is that you can play it very skillfully, but it's also, it strikes that fine balance where the difficulty is high, but it's not prohibitively high. If you're bad at it, you can still get through the game.
Exactly. It's not impossible, and you can choose which stars you want to get. I can't remember the total amount of stars you need, but there's something like 120 total, but you only need a portion of that to beat the game. So, I mean, the game's pretty fair that way.
Mm-hmm. And I think that element of choice, that being able to choose which star you're going for and kind of having that direction each time you go into the world, I think that helps a lot in terms of getting players engaged in the world. Because anytime you give, I feel like anytime you give players choice, that immediately gives them a sense of agency. Like they're not just going through the motions, and the ability to run around in 3D, especially in 1996. And also you have all these different goals, and you can choose to go to one that's a little bit easier if you hit one that's more frustrating. I think that's a really powerful thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, me with ADD, I don't want to be forced to do the baby penguin one.
That one's terrible.
Period.
That's the worst mission.
Yeah, I can choose not to do it, or I can suck it up and suffer eventually after I go through a bunch of other levels, which I did. I did eventually get that stupid. Anyway, so speaking of the worst things in the game, what do you think is the worst level, or at least what was the worst level for you to play through?
You know what? I think in my memory, and it's probably, if I went back and played it now, it probably wouldn't be as hard, but in my memory, it's the penguin slide level.
Okay.
Where you have to get down the slide in a certain amount of time, and I just remember being stuck on that for so long and going off of like the edges of the slide and all of that, and it was an infuriating experience.
Okay.
But
so the overall Snowman's Land then, or just that star?
Just that star. Maybe I would extend it to the entire level. Like, I think the penguins are cute.
Yeah.
But I find the sliding and slipperiness of the level to be really frustrating in a game that kind of builds itself on being kind of precise and platformy and such.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely threw me off. I had to do that level, or that star, a few times. But, I mean, at the same time, it was still fun to slide around. Just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does definitely serve to kind of break up the rest of the game. So, like, I don't hold too much against it, because it kind of fills a pacing role in terms of, like, what you're playing through and kind of making things seem different.
Yeah.
And another thing that makes things seem different are the Bowser levels.
Yeah.
Anytime you encounter Bowser in this game, instead of having kind of this open area to explore, you basically just have a straight shot path that you have to get through that's full of obstacles that keeps you that are between you and Bowser. And it makes things seem, by narrowing it down like that, it makes things more dramatic from both the gameplay and the narrative aspect.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, there's not a ton of narrative because A, it's an early N64 game, and B, it's a Mario game. And, like, I think the extent of the story in Super Mario 64 is Princess Peach sends a letter to Mario and is like, hey, I have a cake for you. And then Mario gets there and Bowser has taken over the castle.
The end.
And that's basically the story.
And you have to get a certain amount of stars to give the power back to the castle or something. It's like, sure.
Yeah. Unlock the throne room or whatever.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's being recorded for like reality show or something.
Yeah.
I never really understood that
weird.
Completely, but
I mean, so from a design perspective, what the people developing Super Mario 64 thought with the camera was that because it's one of the first 3D games that a lot of people will experience, they won't necessarily understand the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And so they made like an actual character holding the camera to explain the camera existing and being able to move around Mario like that.
Yeah. I suppose, yeah, I can appreciate that.
That's a really interesting solution to that kind of like newfangled gameplay technique or camera angle, I guess. And I dig it, and I kind of wish more games would do that, because I can't think of many other games that had like a specific character that was the camera.
Yeah.
I feel like you could do some interesting things with that.
Yeah, and I feel like at least not to my memory, any other game has really done that, at least in terms of explaining the camera. I think all games after that pretty much just kind of accepted that as a core mechanic, which made the game pretty revolutionary and contributes to its golden status,
Yeah. And like Super Mario 64 wasn't the first 3D platformer, but it was the first on consoles, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
And so it's almost like that character is there as an explanation to younger people who wouldn't quite grasp the concept or had never seen anything like that, because I think the other ones were on, PC, and you had to have like a higher end PC to play games. So, but that was a really long and roundabout way to get to the point about Bowser levels, which is that the narrative of Super Mario 64 is much more about just the moment-to-moment adventure, and the way that gameplay and the environments kind of work together to create natural, dramatic tension in the story of each level. That's kind of the story of each playthrough that you're experiencing. And so when you go through a Bowser level, you're going through all of these obstacles, and it's kind of this escalating sense of danger, and then you finally make it to Bowser, and you have this climactic confrontation. And it's really, it feels cool to make it through that.
And I love the music. And Bowser's laugh, oh my god, Bowser's laugh is iconic.
Wah, 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 wah.
Like, I need that as my phone ringtone, like 2007 style. Yeah. Remember when you had to buy ringtones, or like, ooh, yeah. It was the BP version, even earlier than that, like 2004. I remember I bought like No Doubt, like Just a Girl, like BP version. So that was my ringtone. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Anyway, I do have to say though, as great as this game feels and as great as that camera is, those underwater levels, they were kind of torture for me. And that definitely contributed for me to the whole Boo underwater level of that era, like with the Ocarina of Time underwater level.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and just say that if you went back and played the underwater level and the water temple from Ocarina of Time, it's not that bad.
Yeah, that's true. Not. But these are nostalgia lenses. You gotta remember.
Right. I just had to give a shout out to my homeboy. Ocarina of Time.
Ocarina of Time.
It's incorrect.
Anyway, I can't remember I think Mario ran out of breath in that level too. Like that was a part of
you
the
could
mechanic.
Drown. You could drown. So, it was awful.
And young me, not being totally experienced in gaming yet, like the panic set in. Like it's a great intentional game choice to make that a mechanic. But it made it super frustrating when I was trying to dodge that stupid eel that, jets out at you, tries to get the red coins, or, do whatever stupid task to get the stars. That just gave me a heart attack pretty much. I hate it. Like, I was probably holding my breath while playing it, and that probably contributed to the bad memories, but, talk about immersion, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it's hard to judge stuff that we played when we were kids.
Yep.
A lot of the time, because when you're a kid, you feel things so deeply that when you're an adult, you look back on it, you're like, why? That was just a game. Mm-hmm. But there was something very visceral and chilling about watching Mario drown.
Yeah, because he his eyes turned the X's or something, and he started floating. I can't remember exactly what happened.
You see him clutching his throat and thrashing around underwater. Yeah, it's really creepy. I think even if you go back today and look that up, it's disturbing.
Yeah, that just adds to the stress of me like roaming around trying to get a star. I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna kill Mario. I like Mario.
Yeah, and when you're like a younger kid, you're not able to kind of mentally back off or de-invest yourself in a situation. So like, it feels you get super anxious about dying and failing because, to you that's like that is your life,
Yes. And
you
didn't they have
invested in it.
I can't remember the life system either. Didn't it actually matter if you died too? Like you lost?
Yeah, you had lives.
Yeah.
And you got more lives by finding 1-ups or collecting 100 coins.
That's right. Kind of Mario style, if you will.
Yeah. Strangely.
And speaking of drowning, there's a video on YouTube called The Evolution of Drowning Mario in 3D Games, and the thumbnail on it is a bunch of pictures of Mario drowning, and then the one in the middle is like the X's on his eyes. It's pretty great. So
that are just you mentioning that made me uncomfortable. So thank you.
And then there's another one called Let's Drown Super Mario 64. So someone made a video of Mario drowning, just Mario drowning, and uploaded it to YouTube. So
great. Well, you can find that video, and you'll know exactly what we're talking about. So, one fun fact that I really like about Super Mario 64 is that it has some very early examples of voice acting.
Yes.
And it's notable for being the first, for being the console debut of Charles Martinet, who is known as the voice of Super Mario in the United States.
Yeah.
And this actually wasn't his first Mario game. He had also he had first done the voice of Mario in Mario Does Typing, and then Mario's Game Gallery, which was like a collection of board games for the the PC back in the day. So a lot of people, when they played Super Mario 64, associated his voice with Mario and have ever since.
Yeah, which is crazy because you always think of Mario's voice as just something that has always been there. So that's really crazy to think of that. I mean, it makes sense, yeah, because we didn't have a lot of voice acting before that, so I didn't even know that.
It's weird because at that time there wasn't really voice acting for games, and so like they would just, if a game needed voice acting, they would just get random people to do voice acting.
I'm pretty sure that's what they did with Peach, because if you listen to Peach, I mean, she's the other voice you hear in the game, and it's like in the beginning it's super muffled, and she's just like, Mario, I have cake for you. Come eat the cake.
That's actually 100% what happened, because they gave it to a woman named Leslie Swan, who was the senior editor at Nintendo Power.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
She wrote the English text for Super Mario 64, and then they were just like, hey, you want to do the voice of Peach? And she said yeah. So
that's pretty great.
I wish I could have a gig like that where someone was just like, hey, you want to voice act in this game that you worked on? And I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not?
Especially a Mario game, man.
Right? I could do a Toad!
Oh my god. You're submitting that on your voice acting reel. Oh my gosh. That reminds me. I was watching videos to remind me what these levels look like, and there's in the lava level there's these like horned, but I cannot remember what they're called. But anyway, they're horned little dudes, and they push you off, and I remember
they're like bullies. They're bulls.
So I remember when I was watching the video, I was watching it on without sound, and I just like involuntarily did the noise, just because I remembered it so much. Because I mean, the music in this game and the sounds are iconic. They are absolutely video game iconic. Obviously, we have the voice acting of Mario, which just became a part of video game history forever. But then you get the beautiful music in certain levels that helped set the tone, and I mean some cartoony, goofy music, but that kind of fit also with the type of levels that it was with. Like the underwater level music was awesome. It was soothing. It was for lack of better words, wavy. It didn't help me not have a panic attack while playing, but it was still pretty.
Well, yeah, Koji Kondo is one of video games' greatest treasures. Like,
yes,
he's done the music for like almost every iconic like Nintendo game ever. And one of the things that amazes me is that Punch-Out was his very first video game job.
Huh.
And Punch-Out, if you've never heard the theme to Punch-Out, it's amazing. It's everything you could want out of a game that is entirely about punching people, and it's fantastic. And from there, he just goes on to like do Super Mario Brothers, then The Legend of Zelda, and then he did like every single Super Mario Brothers game for decades. And he's made some of the most iconic video game music ever. Yoshi's Island, that was him. Star Fox, that was him. He also did almost every single Legend of Zelda game.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, he's, like, one of the best. And pretty much everything he touches musically is fantastic.
Yeah.
And Super Mario 64 is no exception.
Yeah, like, he definitely defined what video games sound like, I think. And that's not really an overstatement, because a lot of games take inspiration from games like Mario 64 and Nintendo games in general.
Yeah. And I mean, he's like, to this day, he's still composing stuff. Like, he did the Super Mario Odyssey soundtrack. He composed that. And like, he oversees a lot of the music on pretty much everything else that Nintendo puts out as like a first party thing. So he's pretty freaking rad. And if you
and
never
if he's
heard
listening,
Koji Kondo,
we love you.
if it wasn't clear. But yeah, there's just a lot of really neat stuff behind the scenes of Super Mario 64 too.
Yes. And
Like,
one thing that I just love doing when I play this game, boot it up, there's Mario's face. You could just start the game if you wanted. Or you could stretch Mario's face and bump into him and bug Mario, make him dizzy. That's what I did. Like, too much time was spent just messing with Mario. That was... just little details like that just make this game awesome. Like, when you're on the snow levels, you will sink into the snow, like, if you drop down. Like, just little details like that.
Yeah. I mean, like, the little things are kind of what really make Super Mario 64, especially because like, you have hindsight for the game, so that must have taken them a while to figure out all those little details that they could fit in, you know?
Yeah, these were extras, essentially, but they deemed it necessary to make this game a complete experience for people, and that just shows, in general, just master craftsmanship, you know?
Yeah. One thing that one fun fact is that I like that the Super Mario 64 was officially released in China in 2003 for a China-specific console called the iQue, and it's spelled IQUE. And the idea that it came to China 13 years later and was also well received there. Like, I don't know. There's something to me that speaks to the universality of Super Mario 64.
Yeah. It kind of defines video games. It was just at that point in time and was revolutionary enough to just be kind of a blip on the timeline, I think, because so many different games kind of branched off of it. It was able to do the 3D mechanics so well that it kind of set the benchmark for it. And I was reading that a lot of games probably wouldn't exist, at least the way they do, if Mario 64 didn't exist as it does. Like, for example, Kingdom Hearts is a game that they said they got tremendous influence from Mario 64. And I can
Really?
I can see that. Yeah. that was at least the one that was more interesting to me. There's definitely a lot more obvious games that drew influence, but I can definitely see Mario 64 in Kingdom Hearts, at least the way you feel in the world and how the game plays. And just, I keep on going back to like just this is a core video game, but that's because it did really do these 3D mechanics that well, and that's why a lot of video games kind of feel similar. You know, they all drew influence from this game, I think, and we get that video game-y-ness from that. You know, that's so eloquent, I know.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem like there aren't any problems with Super Mario 64. Like, there are problems if you go back and you try and fiddle with the camera. It feels rough.
Oh, yeah.
But I still find it fun, and I don't think that is just my nostalgia talking. And you see in that kind of the bedrock of every single console game that has come after it. You know, it's what helped refine everything else, and I think that is really important too. And I guess one of the interesting things is that it was coming out at a time when graphics, when developers were pushing graphics, and to an extent we've kind of seen that die away a little bit in the modern era, just because everything looks pretty good. Like, anyone can get a hold of Unreal Engine 4 now, and it's free, and it has a free licensing deal for anyone who wants to play around with it and use it. So a lot of things look pretty good. But back when Super Mario 64 came out, they were really emphasizing how Super Mario 64 would look like a moving cartoon. And obviously, looking back on it, it doesn't quite hit that, but you can imagine, being in 1996 and seeing this and being completely blown away compared to what you had before. Compare it to Star Fox for the Super Nintendo.
Yes.
It's crazy how much better it looks. And what's interesting is that even then you had arguments about what made a game worthwhile. Like, was it the graphics, or was it the content of the game and the way it engaged the player? And that was really seen in how Miyamoto, kind of behind the scenes, was really worried about launching Super Mario 64 against the Tamagotchi craze that was sweeping kind of the world at the time. There was a period of time where the people who were high up at Nintendo were genuinely really worried that Tamagotchi would destroy the video game market for them, which is really interesting to me.
It is interesting, especially when Tamagotchi is great. I got super addicted to my Tamagotchi, but if you look at it from like an outsider, well, it's still alive. It's just really bizarre. Yes. They definitely up the graphics. There's a mobile game out now, but it's just what made Tamagotchi special back then, I think, is definitely kind of withered away. It's still got its core audience, of course, if you want a cute little pooping monster that you have to feed and all that. But, I can understand. Nintendo understands the power of the gimmick, I guess. And I think they would have probably known how to bottle it better. Then I think wasn't it like Namco who made Tamagotchi? Something weird like that.
It wasn't Namco. It was oh gosh. This is
Video game
bug
history
me.
101. All right. Anyway.
It was you're close. It was Bandai.
Oh, well, I can see why I got
But they
that.
have since combined into one company, Bandai Namco.
All right. Well, anyway, what was I saying?
Nintendo would know how to bottle it.
Yeah,
better.
so I understand their concern. I definitely wouldn't see it derailing the entirety of video games. But, we have things like Pokemon that has the same kind of viral intensity that Tamagotchi had. Tamagotchi just didn't catch up with the technology as fast as it should have. And they were very, very frustrating little monsters. There was a very specific moveset that you had to do to keep them alive for one, but then to breed, strong and smart Tamagotchi was a whole other neck of dedication. So I can understand.
I'm getting the feeling that you know a whole lot about Tamagotchi.
I know some. I definitely don't know how to get each Tamagotchi perfectly or anything. I just was super frustrated by them all the time. Because I would be dedicating myself to them, waiting for the stupid buzz, and then they'd still die. So, anyway. I mean, Tamagotchi, they had something really good there, and I think that if we were able to see that's what's tough. I think, and this is turning into why Tamagotchi is not the best game, period, but it has that kind of pet keeping your own pet mechanic that Pokemon has that I think made it really special, because people want that kind of aspect to it, but it's just so bizarre to compare it to Mario 64. So if you look at it from the outside perspective, it's this little beeping plastic thing with a ugly little monster on it.
With compared to 20 pixels.
Yeah, compared to this not open world, to this 3D game.
I mean, it is kind of an open world.
Yeah, I suppose. Because you can choose where to go.
Skyrim, it's pretty small.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so I understand where they'd be threatened. I don't see Tamagotchi taking over the world. Watch now that I say that, it's gonna come back. But yeah, Tamagotchi derailment right there.
Yeah, no kidding. And one of the other interesting things was it surprised me when I was kind of doing some research for this that Miyamoto at this point had so much sway within Nintendo. And I know he had been directing games for quite a while and was like the father of the Super Mario franchise and all these other, super best-selling games, but it was kind of it opened my eyes a little bit when I found out that he had the N64 was supposed to release for Christmas in 1995, and Christmas is a huge time of the year. That's usually when people launch their stuff, and he just went to the president of Nintendo and was like, "Hey, I would like a couple more months." And the president at the time just said, "Yeah, sure. We'll push back the launch of our console from prime buying months to, just middle of April, whatever." And Super Mario 64 happened. That was just interesting to me how much pull he had.
Yeah, I mean, it paid off. So someone knew what they were doing, I guess. And the 64 did relatively well.
It might have ended up hurting the N64.
Yeah.
Just in terms of getting that large sales base that kind of draws third-party developers. But I think it benefited Mario 64, and that's really what we're talking about here. So
exactly, because we could go on forever about the 64 itself. But yeah, I mean, this game, like you said earlier, I wouldn't mind going back and playing it over again. I think that's because it's so segmented, like another Mario game where you could play certain levels and do certain things, but you don't have to go in for the whole experience. You don't have to play through the story to get Mario 64. You can even go, I think you're able to go back and get the stars after you beat the game, if I'm correct. Hopefully.
Yeah,
I think I remember that.
I might be confusing that with Mario 64 DS, which was a great port. I really liked it.
Which, I mean, yeah, you can play that one. So yeah, you can go back in the different levels and maybe try to go get the stars that you missed or get the more difficult ones. And I didn't mind doing that. And I think in a lot of games, you have to do backtracking. That's just kind of what happens, whether it be due to story, level design in general, any of that. I didn't mind going back to certain levels. Like, I was actually looking forward to it. Like, after getting, say, like 10 unlocked, I didn't mind going back to the early beginning levels. It was actually kind of awesome to revisit those levels.
Yeah, because you had over the course of the game, because Mario doesn't really get a whole lot different, by the end of the game, you are much better at playing Super Mario 64. So when you go back and you play through those same levels again to maybe get a star you missed or whatever, you feel that sense of progression that you built up yourself just by playing the game.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's so many different ways, or I guess not so many different ways to play it, but there's different styles to playing the game. Like, you can be the completionist, you can do the bare minimum if you want, you can master the platforming and find those little cheats and shortcuts, which there are plenty of. I mean, there's glitches that'll get you to endgame. There's different little secrets in the game, you know? Like, I remember one of my favorite little pieces of the game is, I think it's in the tower. If you like jump backwards and up into the ceiling, you go into this like mini level or something. And it's like in the sky and you fly around. And, yeah. That was one of my like favorite little pieces, because I was super proud I found it in the first place. It's like, it's not too hidden, but I mean, you know, as a whatever-year-old, it was super exciting. And it's kind of just magical in its design anyway. I mean, you're Mario flying around the clouds, you know, and it's super pretty design. I liked being able to find those little secret places. Like, there's another little level behind the waterfall in the castle that was really awesome to find and play. And I just like the way they connected the castle to the world, but it still felt separate, like you were being transported to a new one. Like, I can't remember it. It's like tiny big island, you know?
Yeah.
That
you grow in size.
Yeah, that feels like a completely different magical land with magic physics in it. Like, that's rad. But it still ties in overall to the feel of the game, which I think is, they did this it's deceptively hard to do that because this game does it so well. Because if you think about it, the levels are pretty diverse. Like, we have the lava level and versus the snow mountain. I mean, they sound pretty basic, but I don't know. I really appreciated what they did in terms of the mechanic design as well as the overall art design, and making it feel really separate but different, if that all makes sense.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So what would you say to people who are kind of, you know, they have heard all this stuff about Mario 64, but they go back and play it and they're just like, this is really dated and old and it kind of sucks. Like, because those people are out there.
Yeah,
like they don't have patience for kind of a more retro game.
Yeah, and there's always the point of, is the game great because it was great back in the day? Like, does it still hold up? And I would say yes to that, because it is still fun to play. It still feels okay. I mean, the graphics are okay too, you know, but the art overall and the design overall is pretty awesome. And I mean, it's tough to go back to an old game that you haven't played and be able to appreciate it for the entirety of its experience, because the entirety of its experience kind of needs that nostalgia factor in it. That's why, you know, maybe playing an old Final Fantasy game is not going to be as impactful for, I don't know, a younger player who's just now coming of age. You know, they're not going to understand why that original Final Fantasy game was so revolutionary, because it's just really tough, especially when these games have mechanics that need you to have skill, or just understand how old game mechanics worked. You know, like stuff like tank controls and all that, which this game doesn't have, but that's just an example. So it's kind of hard to convince those kind of people, because the nostalgia is a part of what makes this game great, so it's hard to describe that nostalgia.
Yes. I will say, though, that Final Fantasy IX, I had never played it before, and I went back and played it last year, and it definitely holds up, and it made me cry, and it was great. So
yeah, and that's the sign of a truly fantastic game. I mean, but you're talking about those difficult naysayers who look past it anyway, you know?
Yeah. Like, I guess, is it a matter, like, because you're going to have people who are saying that the camera is shoddy and frustrating. You're going to have people who say that the graphics are kind of muddy and garish, like they don't look great. And that it's frustrating to play, like the N64 controller is just so blah.
It's lovely. What are you talking about?
So I guess I personally struggle with how to kind of combat or not combat, but like encounter those opinions and like,
yeah,
how do we bring them over to appreciating Mario 64?
Well, I mean, of course we can describe all the things that we're talking about, right, where it's a paramount in game design, but that's ultimately not going to sway everyone. I think it just comes down to a matter of taste. Is it fun? I don't know. It's tough because I do have that bias already, you know. I'm just trying to think back. Like, Metroid isn't my game, but I can appreciate what it means to other people. But I'm never gonna go back and play those games for fun on my own time.
Not even Super Metroid?
Yeah, I mean it's not my jam. I know, but so
Metroid
that's
Prime.
I mean, I haven't played it in a while, but yeah, and
dang,
I just blew Jack's mind.
Who hurt you?
Metroid. So
Mr. Metroid.
So but I can still appreciate those games and what they mean to other people and what they mean to games because they spawned a whole genre, you know, Metroidvania games, and but are you gonna convince me that I should go back and play those games? Probably not.
Okay, so you're saying that, you know, explain the importance of the game and kind of see if you know, not necessarily make the case that you have to enjoy this thing.
Yeah.
That I also enjoy, but
you must.
try and see if you can get across like how important it is in the wider world of gaming.
Yes.
How important how even if you don't particularly enjoy it, you can still appreciate it. Exactly. Which I feel like that's a more, for whatever reason, it's harder to get people to understand that with games than it is with like movies, for example. Like, yeah, like there are a lot of people out there who can go out and appreciate like a super arty farty film and not necessarily enjoy it, but be like, yeah, that was a really important thing, or like maybe a documentary about a really important event that opened the eyes of a lot of people to an important social issue. But you might hate documentaries. Yeah. But you can still appreciate kind of what they're doing, what like the craftsmanship that went into it as being good. It's just not your thing.
Well, I think that also stems from a lot of people don't understand all that goes into making games. You know, especially people who don't really play games, right? They might think it's another medium, and it's so difficult to understand the mechanical barriers of making these games and what a production schedule looks like for these games. And then not to even mention all of the other outside factors like marketing and timing and whatnot. So it's just... And I mean, back in the day when I was a kid, you know, I didn't understand how these games were made, but I understood that they were fun or that they weren't fun, you know? So it's I can understand why people might not necessarily understand why this game is pivotal, but it's just a matter of understanding games in general too. Yeah, I guess.
That seems really elitist.
I've tried not to be. But I mean, it's true. I've never made a game. I've done research about games
what?
and
You lied on your resume.
Right. Game maker. So I can read about making games. I've done research on, production of games, but I don't understand, and I'm not going to until I actually make the game, what it takes to actually do these things. Like, what went into the decision behind, adding certain levels, why did they do it a certain way? So it's difficult to marry the gameplay with the mechanical achievements sometimes. Like, for instance, we'll go super far in the future with Far Cry. It's easy to just focus on the narrative, because a lot of people are saying that, this game touted it was going to be revolutionary and talk about politics. But then we kind of lose the fact of what this game was able to achieve mechanically, So I think it's hard to kind of merge those two things together when it comes to critiques. And with older games, it's easier because we've had a lot more time and a lot more progression in gaming history after that. We were able to see where those threads sprouted out, where new games were made because of Mario 64 and how it was made. It's easier to see that mechanic. And I'm not saying that Far Cry 5 is one of the best games period or anything like that. It's just an example. But yeah, that's a really long tangent way of me saying that it's difficult to understand the mechanics of making games.
Yeah, and especially in 1996, something like this is a technical achievement. They had to use special computers. Nowadays, you can make a game on a laptop. You can make it on a 4-year-old MacBook Pro.
Yeah,
or something.
And older games like this, they had to manipulate things like polygons to make them look realistic, manipulate shadows, manipulate depth of field so that, certain things will look the way they do. There's really interesting, I guess, dissection videos of games. I watched one for Final Fantasy VII where they broke the game and then zoomed the camera out and showed how each part of it was made. And there was one where they zoomed out on a summon. I think it was Bahamut Zero or something, and they zoomed out and then they showed the outside of what this the game area looked like. And it's just super we as civilians, we don't tend to always understand those kind of things. We just see them because that's how it was supposed to be. But that's a sign of master work, we don't notice that these shadows are at a certain angle because of this. We just notice that Mario looks like he's realistically walking in the world.
Yeah.
So speaking of critical response to this game, I hear that you might have a few outside opinions on this game up your sleeve from users.
Yeah, and what are we calling this section?
Oh gosh. Jack's Review Corner.
I still feel like there's a better name floating out there somewhere
than the most obvious name ever.
All right. Yeah. So I collected a few of the negative reviews off of Metacritic. I figured I would read a couple of them. This is from Brain Damage, and it was posted on May 19th, 2015. And here we go. Overrated. There were much better games out on N64 such as Turok and that Star Wars game and Mario Kart 64. This game, in my memory, being 32 now, was not very good for the time, and that was back in 96, my friend. Sega Saturn was better than this piece of crap.
Bravo.
And I'm not entirely sure why a game system was better than Mario 64?
It's obviously a very deep metaphor, Jack.
Oh, really? What, 4?
For game consoles. Like the
Oh,
Sega
okay.
Saturn.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, yeah. Okay. Sure, that makes sense. How did I miss it?
Yeah.
The second one is from Mr. Game Man MD on December 9th, 2014. What happened to Mario? This game does not reflect the greatness of its predecessors, such as Mario Golf on the PlayStation 1 and Tetris. Like many games in recent times, it suffers from a big problem. There is way too much water. The only thing this game has going for it is its deep storyline involving the girl from Last of Dust and Pokemon Diamond. That is why Mario Dreamcast gets a solid 10 out of 10. And the user gave the game a 2 out of 10. So...
Obviously a very serious scholar of Mario, if he knows that Tetris is indeed a predecessor to Mario 64.
You see, that was a deep cut referencing Dr. Mario. Yeah. And clearly this person...
See? I wasn't wrong.
Clearly this person shares your opinion about water levels. Like, there is too much water.
Too much
Way
water
too much
in games.
water. Yeah.
Sea of Thieves, got my eye on you.
I better not see any seas in there.
But to be fair, Sea of Thieves, their water is beautiful.
Geez, I thought it was Seas of Thieves, like the letter C. Oh boy.
That's just a great picture in my head, just a bunch of C's. C. Anyway, so best game period for you, Jack?
Like 100%. Like, this is, to me, this is one of the best games, period. Like, I feel like anyone who's being honest about what belongs on, like, an indispensable list of best games of all time, like, you might dislike Super Mario 64. And I don't blame you if you dislike Super Mario 64, but you can't deny that it was so important to the evolution of games overall, and that it has inspired so many people in so many different ways, like from the music to the way, 3D platformers work and look, to, even just kind of the way developers animated their characters. That was pretty much kind of all going back to Mario 64. And it's just great, and it holds up today, I think, very well. So that's my piece.
Well said, sir. I agree. That's my reason right there too. Just piggyback on you, make you do the work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree. There's not any denying that this game is one of the pillars of modern video game design. You can see and feel its influence in a lot of modern games to this day. So that's why I think it's one of the best games, period.
And I know we didn't mention this, but I just want to add this one last point, and that is, it doesn't overstay its welcome. Like, I feel like there's not really any fat on Super Mario 64. It is, like, everything that's there is necessary and feels purposeful, and you feel like it has a reason for being, and it's good. I think all of it is genuinely pretty good, even the frustrating bits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're just frustrating because of your lack of skill, not because of the game.
Well, I mean... Sometimes. I'm not saying Super Mario 64 is perfect. Okay?
No. Well, no.
Everything has some
obviously
faults.
There's gonna be some weird jankiness, but... Okay.
2 out of 10. Too much water.
Too much water. Yeah. So, Mario 64, we crown you one of the best games, period, at least for our sake. But we will be asking you, dear listeners, what you think of Mario 64 and whether it belongs on the list, along with other fantastically beautiful games.
Heck yeah. And you can find that posted on Twitter at bestgamesperiod, where you can also find us posting episodes and maybe fun tweets from time to time about games or hinting at future games that we will do. It's a good time, so head over there, follow us, tweet us, whatever. We'll respond. You can also find us over on SoundCloud, iTunes, pretty much everywhere where you could find podcasts. We're probably going to be there. Libsyn is our hosting site if you want to go there. It's perfectly valid. And we post new episodes every Monday on GameInformer.com and also Extra Life, specifically community.extra-life.org, where you can find this along with many other interesting articles about games. And if you've never heard of Extra Life before, it's a wonderful charity that helps sick and injured kids all across the United States and Canada. It's really a fantastic nonprofit charity. I encourage everyone to check it out over at extra-life.org. And one of the cool things is when you sign up, you can actually choose which Children's Miracle Network hospital you want to support, and 100% of everything you raise goes directly to helping sick and injured kids at that hospital. It's pretty great. And we also have a Patreon, so you should maybe throw us $1 every month to help us keep the lights on and keep making this show and having fun chats with all y'all.
Yeah, and we'll be rolling out some pretty sweet content on there pretty soon, so you don't want to miss any of that.
Heck yeah. And if you do back us with $1 per month, like one of the extra things you get is sometimes we put little mini or full episodes on that are exclusive to you people. So check it out if you get a chance.
Heck yeah. Along with all those amazing, beautiful, fantastic features, we will have a landing site, Tumblr for Extra Life for Best Games period coming up soon. So stay tuned to Twitter. We'll get a link up there for that very soon.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Naomi, for joining me tonight.
For sure.
And I'll be seeing all of you on the Flippity Dippity.